The first light of morning broke across the prairie in streaks of pale gold, the kind of light that usually promised another day of dust, work, and whiskey. The town was just stirring when the rancher rode in, saddle creaking beneath him, dust rising with each tired hoofstep. His only intention had been simple: buy a bottle, drown the silence, and ride back out to the emptiness he called home. But silence wasn't what greeted him. At the center of the town, hanging from the crossbeam outside the sheriff's office, a body swayed gently in the cool morning wind. A girl, Apache, no older than 16. Her black hair hung loose over her shoulders, her feet bare and lifeless above the dirt street. The rope creaked against the timber, each sway punctuated by the buzzing of flies that had already gathered around her stillness. The rancher's horse snorted uneasily, as though it too understood the cruelty before them. His hand gripped the reins tighter, jaw clenched beneath his unshaven face. He hadn't come for this. He hadn't wanted this. And yet, here it was. The sight that no whiskey in the world could wash away. The townsfolk went about their business with cold indifference. A man spat in the dust. A woman dragged her child past without a glance. To them, it was just another morning, just another body swinging because someone said she deserved it. But to the rancher, it wasn't just another body. The sight struck deeper than he cared to admit, stirring something he had long buried. Memories of firelit raids, of children screaming, of justice twisted into spectacle. He tipped his hat lower over his eyes, shadow hiding the storm building within. He hadn't come to fight. He hadn't come to remember. He hadn't come to be pulled back into the blood-soaked business of other men's sins. And yet, staring at that lifeless girl, he knew. Whatever road he had thought he was on, it had just ended here. The crowd muttered as the rancher slid his knife against the coarse hemp rope, the blade sawing through until the knot gave way. The girl's small body dropped into his arms, light as a bundle of sticks, her head lolling, black hair tangled with dust. A hiss of anger rose from the townsfolk like snakes disturbed in dry grass. One man spat, another cursed. "Leave her where she swung," someone growled. But the rancher said nothing. His jaw tightened. His boots ground into the dirt as he walked away, the weight of the girl pressed against his chest. The sheriff's men didn't stop him. Not yet. They just watched, squinting through the morning glare, hands on holsters. One of them chuckled low, cruel. Let him take her. He'll pay for it by nightfall. By the time the rancher reached his horse, his knuckles were white around the reins. He placed the girl across the saddle, mounted, and turned his back on their stares. Behind him, the rope still swung empty, a gallows without a body. It creaked in the wind like a warning bell. The ride home stretched across endless prairie, the land dry and brittle under the noon sun. Grass bent to the wind in waves, and a hawk traced his shadow across the soil. The girl's body didn't stir. He didn't speak. Only the rhythmic clop of hooves carried them forward, each strike echoing his own doubt. By the time his cabin came into sight, weathered timbers leaning against the horizon, his shoulders felt the weight of more than a corpse. He had cut down the dead, and in this land, that meant carrying her sins as well. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and iron. He laid the girl gently on a wool blanket near the hearth. The flicker of lantern light caught her face, bruised, dirt-streaked, eyes closed forever. He stood over her a long while, silent. A knock rattled the door. It wasn't a stranger. It was Eli, the old trapper who lived along the creek. His beard was wild, his eyes sharp, and his tone cut straight to the point. "You've gone and done it now," Eli muttered, stepping inside, boots scraping the floorboards. His gaze fixed on the girl. "Sheriff will see you buried for this, same as her." The rancher poured 2 cups of water, handed one over without a word. The lantern hissed as it burned. "You know what it means keeping her here," Eli pressed, voice low, dangerous. "Apache blood brings trouble. Dead or alive, you're marked." The rancher didn't answer right away. He stared at the body, the quilt pulled over her shoulders. "Finally," he said, rough and quiet, "then let trouble come." The cabin settled into silence again, broken only by the creak of timber and the far-off wail of coyotes. But in that silence lay the truth. By cutting her down, By carrying her here, he had chosen his side. And there was no turning back. The cabin was still and heavy with the scent of smoke and sweat. Outside, the prairie winds rattled the loose boards, but inside, lantern light threw uneasy shadows across the walls. The rancher had laid the Apache girl's body on a rough-hewn table, his weathered hands working slow, deliberate. He wasn't a preacher, nor a doctor, but something in him demanded she not be tossed into an unmarked hole like the town intended. He covered her gently with an old wool blanket, the fabric thin from years of use. He muttered low, almost to himself. She was just a child. The words hung in the air, daring anyone to challenge them. From the corner, the Mexican drifter cleared his throat. He was a quiet man, wiry and sunburned, with a voice that rasped like gravel. "They said she stole a silver brooch," he murmured. "But I saw her that morning." Empty hands. It was planted. The rancher didn't look up. His jaw worked, grinding against memory. "And they strung her up for it." He spat into the dirt at his boots. "Town's too quick with rope, not near fast enough with truth." The settler woman stirred then, her thin frame trembling in the firelight. She had the hollow look of someone who'd buried more than one child. Her voice cracked but held a sharp edge. "They took my boy, too. Said he was caught trespassing, but he was only looking for water. Sheriff never cared. The ranch hands run that town, not the law." Her words burned, filling the cabin with something heavier than silence. Proof. Each story layered over the last, drawing a map of cruelty etched into the land. The rancher's eyes narrowed. He remembered nights long ago, the screams when raiders came down from the mesas. His wife's hair spread across the dirt, red with blood. His son's body limp in his arms. Hatred had taken root then, hatred for the Apache, and it had never left. Yet here he stood, burying an Apache girl, killed not by her people's raids, but by the same kind of greed that had stolen his own family. The contradiction twisted inside him like a knife. His voice was low, dangerous. "All these years I thought my hate was clean. Turns out it's just another man's tool." The drifter leaned forward, his dark eyes catching the lantern flame. "You ever wonder why she was marked? Why now, this ain't about silver. It's about land." That was when the settler woman held out the crumpled scrap she'd pulled from the girl's clenched fist. A torn corner of a land deed, edges blood-stained, the ink blurred but still legible. It bore the name of a powerful ranch family, the very men who had called for her hanging. The rancher stared at it for a long while, the paper shaking in his rough hand. The truth lay bare. This wasn't punishment for theft. It was erasure, a way to push her people off the land, piece by piece, rope by rope. The lantern hissed, the shadows shifted, and something inside him hardened. He wasn't burying just a girl now. He was burying the lie they'd used to choke her life away. He lifted his gaze, voice grim, steady as stone. "If they killed her to take that land, then they'll come for anyone standing in their way. That means us." The cabin fell silent again. But it wasn't the silence of mistrust anymore. It was the silence before a storm, the kind that rolls in dark and heavy, carrying thunder in its belly. Dusk bled across the prairie, turning the sky the color of old blood. The cabin stood quiet, lantern light flickering through a single crack in the shutters. Inside, the air was thick with silence, the kind of silence that clings to the skin and warns a man trouble is on the wind. Then came the sound. Hooves. Slow at first, then steady, deliberate, the rhythm of riders who weren't in any hurry because they already owned the night. The rancher's hand went to the rifle leaning by the door. He didn't need to look. He knew by instinct there'd be more than 2 or 3 out there. And he was right. Through the slats of wood, he counted 8 shadows, mounted and waiting, rifles across their saddles. At the head, a man in a wide-brim hat and sheriff's star, glinting faint in the last light. His voice carried with the ease of a man used to being obeyed. "Evening, rancher," the sheriff called, calm as a snake coiled in the grass. "Word is you've got something don't belong to you, something that'll get a man killed quicker than thirst." The rancher didn't answer. He let the silence hang heavy, the way a man sometimes does to test who blinks first. But he could feel the widow stiffen behind him, her breath sharp, her fingers curled around the pistol he'd given her earlier. The sheriff's tone hardened.
You cut down that Apache girl.
Fool's mercy. She was guilty, proven guilty, and the law's spoken. But if you bury her out here, if you keep her memory alive, then the law's going to speak again. And this time it'll be your neck. A rider dismounted, pulling something from his saddlebag. He walked slow to the porch, boots crunching on dry earth. In his hand swung a rope stained dark and wet. He hammered it into the doorframe with the butt of his revolver. The bloody noose dangled there, swaying in the twilight, dripping a final warning onto the wood. Think on it, the sheriff said. By dawn, you hand her over or dig your own grave beside hers. The posse turned, their laughter echoing like coyotes in the distance. The hoofbeats faded, but the noose stayed, creaking in the wind. The rancher stared at it for a long moment. Then he shut the door, bolted it firm, and spoke at last. His voice was low, hard as iron. Let him come. And in that moment, mistrust gave way to something else. The widow's eyes found his. The silence between them no longer felt like doubt. It felt like war. The prairie light was dying fast, the horizon swallowing the last of the sun in a red haze. The cabin sat like a stubborn tooth in the middle of the open land, battered by years of wind and dust, but still standing. Tonight it would either be a fortress or a coffin. Everyone inside knew it. The rancher moved first. He tore up old planks from the shed out back, hammering them across the cabin's windows. Each blow of the hammer rang hollow and heavy, like a funeral drumbeat. He stacked ammunition on the rough-hewn table, counting each round as if they were hours left to live. Beside the fire, the girl's small frame still lay beneath a blanket. But the rancher stopped, his hand hovering. Slowly he fetched an old quilt from his trunk, the quilt his wife had sewn before she died. He laid the Apache girl's body upon it with a reverence that silenced the room. It was no longer just burial cloth. It was a statement. Her memory belonged here now, part of his family, claimed against the men who wanted her forgotten. The survivors stirred to life around him, each taking up a role. The fiery woman, her eyes sharp with anger that had burned too long without justice, set snares and tripwires along the porch and through the brush. She muttered curses under her breath as she worked, promising pain to whoever stepped too close. The quiet drifter crouched low in the corner, a whetstone singing against steel. His blades, curved and worn, caught glimmers of firelight as he sharpened them again and again, his silence more ominous than words. The broken settler woman sat trembling at first, staring at the shotgun in her lap like it was a snake, but then her hand steadied. She loaded the shells one by one, lips pressed in a thin line, her fear bending into resolve. This was not the same woman who had flinched at her own shadow days ago. This was someone reforged by desperation, ready to take a stand. The cabin breathed heavy with tension. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant echo of hooves, or maybe just the groan of the earth. Night settled in like a shroud, wrapping them in silence. The lanterns inside were doused one by one, until only the faint glow of dying coals gave shape to their faces. No one spoke. No one dared. The storm was coming, and every man and woman inside knew it. They sat in the dark, weapons ready, hearts steady, listening to the vast emptiness outside. The prairie night had never been so quiet. Too quiet. Silence before the storm. The night pressed heavy against the cabin, the kind of blackness where even the stars hid themselves. The prairie wind carried the faintest scent of smoke and horse sweat, warning of what was coming before any man could see it. Inside the cabin, the survivors breathed in silence. Every board creaked like a drum of war. The rancher stood at the window, eyes narrow, his finger resting near the trigger of his rifle. He had seen battles before, but this one felt different. This one was for something more than himself. Then it came. A single shot cracked the night wide open. Glass shattered, wood splintered. The porch burst into flames as the sheriff's men let loose their opening barrage. Horses screamed in the dark, lanterns swayed, and bullets chewed through the walls like angry hornets. The siege had begun. The rancher barked a single order. "Hold your ground!" His voice was rough, steady, a man commanding not followers, but people with everything to lose. The fiery settler woman hurled a bucket of water on the first fire, licking up the porch, then crouched with her shotgun ready. The quiet drifter slid to a corner window, blade in hand, waiting for anyone foolish enough to get close. The broken settler woman, trembling but fierce, clutched her weapon and took aim at the shadows outside. The attackers howled through the night, voices drunk with power and hate. "Hand her over, or we'll burn you out." Their torches flickered like demons in the distance. The rancher answered them with the crack of his rifle. One rider tumbled from the saddle, a scream cut short by dust. The fight turned vicious. Gun smoke thickened inside the cabin, choking every breath. Bullets tore through shutters, lodging deep into beams. The survivors answered each shot with their own, holding the line by sheer will. The fiery woman fired through the doorway, dropping another outlaw. Her face glowed fierce in the firelight, determination burning hotter than fear. Outside, the drifter slipped like a shadow into the chaos. He struck hard and fast, a knife across one throat, a pistol round into another belly. He fought like a man with nothing left to lose, because he knew this was the last night he'd see. Then came the break. An outlaw smashed through a window, dragging the broken settler woman into the dirt. She screamed, struggling, but years of sorrow turned in that moment into fury. She seized a fallen revolver and fired point-blank into the man's chest. He fell stiff into the dust, and she stood trembling, smoke rising from the gun, her dignity reclaimed in blood. The rancher battled like a soldier reborn. Each shot was precise, each step measured. His past came roaring back, the fields of war, the smell of powder, the weight of death on his conscience. He fought not for glory, but for redemption, to carve one last piece of justice out of this cruel world. But no man leaves a siege unscathed. The rancher stumbled as a bullet carved across his ribs, crimson blooming on his shirt. He went down on one knee, vision darkening. In that moment, an outlaw rushed in, rifle raised for the kill. The drifter intervened. With a roar, he drove his blade deep, taking the outlaw down but catching a fatal round himself. He collapsed at the rancher's feet, whispering only, "Finish it." Then his eyes stilled, and the prairie claimed him. And then, silence. For a heartbeat, all was still, until the sound of boots crushed the dirt outside. The sheriff himself stepped forward, a hulking figure in the glow of firelight. His revolver gleamed. His voice carried, "This ends now." The final standoff. The rancher rose, wounded but unbroken, his rifle discarded, fists clenched. The sheriff advanced, gun raised. They clashed in the dirt, fists, blood, the crack of bones. Each blow echoed like thunder. The sheriff sneered, pressing the barrel of his revolver to the rancher's chest. But the rancher, with the last of his strength, wrenched it free and fired. The shot lit the night, tearing through the sheriff's chest. He staggered, eyes wide in disbelief, before falling into the dirt, blood darkening the ground he once ruled. The flames on the porch hissed low as the rain finally came, drops sizzling against charred wood and cooling the dust thick with blood. The attackers scattered, leaderless, leaving only silence, smoke, and the dead. The siege was over. The prairie was quiet again. Not silent, but quiet in the way only the frontier could be after a night of violence. Broken fences swaying in the wind, gun smoke clinging to the boards of a battered cabin, and the faint hiss of rain as it kissed the scorched earth. Dawn was breaking over the horizon, a thin red light pushing through clouds heavy with ash and grief. And then, as if heaven itself could no longer bear the stench of spilled blood, the skies opened. Cold rain poured across the dirt yard, sliding down the cabin walls, darkening the bloodstains that no amount of scrubbing would ever wash away. The cabin smoldered, roof singed, porch collapsed, but still it stood. A stubborn monument against the night's fury, much like the man who guarded it. The rancher leaned against the doorframe, his shoulders sagging beneath exhaustion, his hat dripping with rain. He had fought with every breath he had left, and though his body bore new scars, something in his chest felt lighter, as if the battle had burned away years of bitterness. Behind him, the survivors moved with slow reverence. The broken settler woman, her hands shaking but steady, carried a bundle wrapped in cloth. The fiery one placed a spade into the mud, while the quiet drifter's absence was marked only by the blood-stained knife he had left behind. Together, they dug a grave in the wet earth beneath a lone oak tree. When the time came, the rancher himself lowered the girl into the ground. The Apache child who had been denied dignity in life was given honor in death. Her small frame rested on a quilt once belonging to the rancher's family, a final act of kinship that blurred the lines between blood and choice. Over her chest, they laid the cut rope, no longer a tool of cruelty, but a symbol of defiance. As the rain fell harder, the rancher removed his hat and bowed his head. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for vengeance, not for peace, but for strength to carry what had been entrusted to him. The prairie smelled of wet earth and wood smoke, the kind of scent that lingered long after storms. The survivors stood together, strangers no more, bound not by law nor blood, but by what they had endured. The rancher lifted his gaze to the horizon, where the sun finally broke free of the storm clouds. Its light was pale but pure, streaking across the drenched land like a promise. He understood then. Families were not always born. Sometimes they were made in fire, in loss, in nights like this. And as dawn stretched across the wild west, justice, fragile, imperfect but real, rose with it.